Hello, pumpkins! I am the Gourd King, and I am pleased to have you with me today as we count down the toughest remaining foes in Cuphead. If you watched part 1 of this list, you'll know that we stopped at the number 14, aside from this basically being the midway point between 1 and 27. The other reason I stopped here is because starting from the number 13 spot, the boss difficulty really ratcheted up for me. Whether by the high amount of deaths or the time I spent trying to overcome them, these are the enemies that distinguish themselves as the game's most difficult. So sit back, grab a seasonal beverage of your choice, and join me as we trek our way through part 2 of my Cuphead boss ranking. Beginning the upper half of this list at number 13 is Jimmy the Great. I have no idea what person rubbed what lamp to release this guy, but aside from that classy pipe in his mouth, Jimmy is a bit of a menace. He begins the fight with a literal treasure trove of offense. From his chest can come one of 3 attacks. There are floating swords, which will line up on one or both sides of the screen, depending on the difficulty, and then fire at you one by one. Then there are cat sarcophagi that act like Russian nesting dolls and track you as you fly around the screen. Or perhaps the chest will simply spew goblets, gems, and jewels for you to dodge. No matter which of these you're forced to deal with, this can be a frustrating segment, as dodging any one of these attacks can easily drain your HP rather early. But so long as you fire ceaselessly while attempting to dodge Jimmy's attacks, you should only have to face one of them before it's time for phase 2. Here you must shoot the laughing faces in the columns while avoiding the buzzsaws, then fly your way through the openings you've created. Navigating this short phase is simple enough as a concept, though I must admit there were more than a few times where the collisions with the saws or the pillars did cost me a bit of health, which is no small thing in this 5-phase affair. After you've finished this portion of the fight, Jimmy returns as a sarcophagus, and I'm a little confused about the implications here. Is Jimmy a genie who is desecrating the grave of a mummy, or is he the spirit of an ancient pharaoh who kind of resembles Patrick Star? Either way, shoot him in the face. You'll have to dodge ghostly mummies and the occasional ring and ball attacks, but this is probably the easiest sequence of the battle. Following this, Jimmy gets a bright idea and morphs into a marionette version of our titular hero.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim.
He then sends his turban after you, and after it tracks your plane around the screen, it will halt and fire pellets for you to avoid. On top of this, Puppet Cuphead will do your finger gun attack. Avoiding damage here can be trickier than it sounds, as the bullets Puppet Head fires go directly to wherever you're flying, so give yourself enough space to dodge those and the turban attacks at the same time. The amount of room you have to dodge is also limited by the puppet spraying smaller bullets at an obtuse angle, which basically keeps you from the side of the screen where he is present. I won't lie, this is probably the phase I had the most difficulty surviving, though a lot of that is because it's the 4th of the 5, so by now there's a good chance you've been losing HP here and there, but so long as you're firing away consistently and avoiding damage, you'll be free of it soon enough. Finally, Jimmy swells to fill most of the right side of the screen. He shoots rings from his head, which are easy to avoid, and then the floating pyramids will occasionally fire crosses of dark energy. This is definitely the easiest part of the fight, though if the other 4 phases have drained you of HP, you might have to do it mistake-free, which can be stressful. But if you come to it with multiple HP points remaining, finishing Jimmy off should take you little time at all, and soon it'll be him wishing that he'd never left the lamp. King Dice is number 12 on this list, and you need to strap in because this is going to be a long one. I find it strange how many lists rank the 9 mini-bosses of this fight and Dice himself separately, considering that this is a gauntlet. I get that they're separate enemies and that you're almost certainly not going to face each one in a given run, but I do still tend to see this as one collective battle, even if it varies in difficulty depending on which of Dice's minions you end up facing. If you're curious about how I'd rank these minions individually, I've done so from easiest to hardest, so you can see it scrolling now at the bottom of your screen. But I'll simply be talking about them in the order you can face them. The first slot on the board leads to the Tipsy Troop, a trio of glasses containing sin juice and olives. On my first run on regular difficulty, I found this fight to be highly annoying, though the rum glasses spill attack was the primary source of that frustration. Not only is this a waste of good beverage, but I was terrible at dodging it for quite some time. And it doesn't help that this mini-boss is among the longest fights of the gauntlet, as you must kill each troop member individually. If you can survive without taking a hit in this fight, go ahead and blast these boozy breakables, but given how important it is to preserve HP, I would avoid them if possible. The second slot is Chips Bedigan, a simple stack of chips that has just one attack, which is moving from one side of the screen to the other and mixing up which chips move where and when. So long as you're good at precision jumping, Chips is a breeze and possibly the easiest of the lot. Slot 3 is Mr. Wheezy, a lit cigar who, like Jay-Z, is spitting straight fire. Actually, Wheezy's travels in a loop, but that's still pretty fly, bro.
You're so white.
Truth be told, I think this fight is a lot of spectacle meant to intimidate the player, but in reality, avoiding fireballs is not too tough. Wheezy will move back and forth between ashtrays as you do damage to him, but your window to move between the cigarettes floating in the center is pretty reasonable. I think the real threat of this fight are the effects of secondhand smoke Cuphead might suffer later in life. But in the short term, Mr. Wheezy should be renamed Mr. Easy. Number 4 is Pip and Dot, and I have a lot of questions about the relationship of the boy-girl halves of this domino. It appears romantic and yet logically should be brother and sister. Of course, we are in Inkwell Hell for this fight, so I guess at least we know how they got there. Anyway, I think I found this mini-boss to be the most frustrating. Not because it's actually hard, but rather because it isn't, and yet I always seem to lose 1 or 2 HP on it. Whether by landing on the spikes or getting hit by the bird or the 20-sided die they summon, this questionable coupling always seemed to leave me a bit worse for wear. The 5th slot contains Hopus Pocus. Hoppus Pocus? I'm not sure, but it's a bunny who probably betrayed the magician who rescued him from the bottom of a hat and then took his livelihood and magical powers. The rabbit's first attack, where he surrounds you in a ring of bunny skulls, did manage to nab an HP point or 2 for me from time to time, though I did later figure out that the smoke bomb charm is the perfect way to avoid damage here. His only other attack is sending a row of card suits from above or below, which requires you to parry off of the pink one. Play your cards right, and Hopus Pocus can be one of the easiest of Dice's friends, but he does take a bit more getting used to than a few of the others. In at number 6 is Fear Lap. His only attack is shooting a blue present box at you that explodes and sends out horseshoe projectiles, which are easy to avoid. There are some jockeys below to keep an eye on, as the ones in the blue cloaks will leap up after you. Honestly though, Fear Lap is very simple. Piruletta is next, and honestly, this dancing roulette wheel was a bit of an annoyance for me. I often mistime my parries over her, and when she fires roulette balls in the air, the space you have to dodge them is very tight. While she's not the toughest of the gauntlet, she is one of the easiest to lose HP to, which can be really bad at this late stage of Dice's fight. The 8th slot is an 8-ball named, Mangosteen. Okay, whatever. He's easy. Dodge the orbs and stand beside the billiard chalks before they jump, and this guy can be ditched in no time. 9th is Mr. Chimes, a musical monkey who seems hell-bent on interrupting while I play a game of memory. And just like that children's card game, once a match is found, you can start shooting the monkey while he tries to beat you with the power of music. At least that's how we played when I was a kid. Clear all of the cards and shoot down the monkey, and the bout is over. And finally, we are on to King Dice himself. The object of this fight is very simple. You fire away while parrying off of the pink cards he's sending after you until the battle is over. Of course, on my first playthrough, the king seemed to become oddly enamored with just walking his fingers and doing little else. I understand that somehow he glitched out, but I like to imagine that King Dice saw the error of his ways and allowed me to put him down like Old Yeller. Number 11 on this list is the Devil himself, and he proved quite the formidable foe when I first encountered him. In fact, if this ranking were based solely on my first time playing Cuphead, he'd rank in the top 3. Of course, going for the A grade after having already beaten him took only 2 tries, and our Battle on Expert only took 3. The reality is that once you understand the Devil and his tricks, he's much less of a challenge. He does have a fair amount of attacks in his 4 phases that took a while to get used to, but once you do, the memory of him being something of a hassle fades further and further into memory. The first part of the fight is definitely the toughest, as this wicked furry unleashes numerous attacks. He can summon fireballs that rotate in a circle or that shoot at the spot where you're standing, or he'll morph into a dragon and snake across the screen at you, or perhaps a spider that drops down on top of you. He can send a mini-me version of himself, cover the lower part of the screen with a single clap, or try a little playtime with some bouncing balls. It's a highly unpredictable phase that forces the player to figure out quite a bevy of different kinds of deadly offense from the big baddie. But once you've gotten used to each one, it really mitigates the challenge. Phase 2 is far easier, as the Devil's giant head is now the target and his offense is much easier to avoid. Just dodge the spinning axes, avoid the falling poker chips, and either parry or avoid the flying bombs, and you'll be through this phase in no time. Following this, you'll fight from the 3 middle platforms as 2 of the devil's minions appear on either side of the screen. They'll attack you with skulls, and there are bat-like demons overhead. All of these enemies can be eliminated with a bit of damage, but they'll be resummoned, and you're better off just dodging their attacks and focusing on the devil. There's also an occasional falling poker chip to dodge, and that's your cue to switch platforms. For the fight's final phase, Cuphead's main foe has a bit of a meltdown like LeBron James when the cramps set in. Just avoid the tears and the poker chips, and this salty Satan is down for the count.
Okay, I imagine anyone who has watched another list or played the DLC themselves is probably a bit surprised to see Chef Saltbaker at number 10. However, I tend to think that others that have made their own list are probably referring to the challenge he presents on expert difficulty, in which case I would rank him much higher as well. Of course, I stated in part 1 of this list that my own rankings incorporated both regular and expert playthroughs, and the simple fact of the matter is that on regular difficulty, I didn't struggle all that much with Saltbaker. He was definitely a battle that kept me on my toes, and there was a lot of ducking and dodging going on, but he actually only managed 5 kills against me during my first playthrough, which is tied for the 3rd lowest total of all the bosses. And when going for an A grade, he managed just 2 more. On Expert, of course, Saltbaker becomes much tougher to deal with, and the number of kills he scored against me skyrocketed, 39 to be exact, which was 3rd highest. Saltbaker's first phase is the game's ultimate test of your dodging skills. Sugar cubes, fire, lime wedges, animal crackers, strawberries. This guy is throwing everything but the kitchen sink at you, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a blast. Phase 2 is also a lot of fun, as you're tasked with shooting pepper shakers until they launch at the chef's face. As you're doing this, you have to dodge the fire, basil leaves, and peppercorns, which is honestly the trickiest part of the fight if you ask me. Phases 3 and 4 are unfortunately not quite up to the same level as the first 2. I'd argue that those are among the absolute best that Cuphead has to offer as a whole, but Phase 3 of the fight is so short and simple that it really just feels like the animators wanted to show off the questionable hobbies Saltbaker has when he's not cooking up evil schemes and pastries. The last phase is an improvement over the prior one, but still short and easy. It is gorgeously animated, and it's a bit of a rush to move up the falling platforms while either dodging or parrying off of Saltbaker's heart, but it's over in no time. Beating this boss in so few tries, both on my first playthrough and while going for the A grade, still surprises me when I rewatch the footage. It's undeniable how difficult the fight is, and yet somehow I died more times fighting Goopy LeGrande on regular than I did Saltbaker. I can't decide if I should feel proud of how I progressed, or ashamed of how I started. Again though, once you up the difficulty, Saltbaker shows why he's considered one of the game's most brutal challenges, all while maintaining an excellent sense of fun. By the way, I am considering doing a live stream and later a boss ranking based solely on the S ranking. And that's in no small part due to bosses like this one. What do you guys think? Would you like to see that? Let me know in the comments below. Coming in at number 9 is Esther Winchester, who is the law in these here parts. While it is admirable that Esther shattered glass ceilings for both ladies and cows by becoming sheriff, wearing a saloon isn't merely an odd fashion choice, but indicative of her possibly being unstable?
Esther's first phase is sheer chaos. She fires a snake oil gun that shoots pellets that actually become snakes, lassos a cactus that makes one of the halves of the screen a hazard, and has a pair of friends that will either throw dynamite or fire a spiked cactus ball at the player. Amongst the game's several plane-based boss fights, this phase is one of the toughest.
Following this, Esther loses the saloon and decides to do her daily chores. She turns on her vacuum cleaner, causing coins, money bags, fat stacks, and even a few loose police badges to be sucked into the device, all of which I had to avoid. She then hits the reverse function, and the vacuum fires safes up into the air. They burst upon landing, and gold bars, coins, and more money stacks come flying out. It's a good test of one's dodging abilities, but also raises questions about Esther's duties as town sheriff and cleaning lady, and the efficacy of her methods. What cannot be questioned is Esther's vacuum, as she clearly underestimated its sucking power. It swallows her up, and then she comes out having been processed into sausage links. I've personally never owned a vacuum that can perform this function. Must be a Dyson. As you fly around dodging bean cans and the contents therein, Esther spits uncooked steaks at you, which is disturbing since she's spitting out slices of herself, and yet still appetizing because, well, it's steaks.
If this channel grows large enough to get sponsors one day, my hope is that the first one will give me free meat. Once past this part of the fight, Esther is canned but has one more trick in her chaps. 2 lines of sausage links come out and will move in 2 lines like a V shape and close like scissors on you, but you can move between the gaps to avoid damage. On top of this, you'll have peppers fired at you, though there's typically a pink one you can parry. Once enough damage has been done, the Mad Cow is defeated and one can move on from this rather high-stakes battle.
As I was saying.
Soaring into the number 8 spot is Wally Warbles, who is in no way modeled or named after Woody Woodpecker. And for that matter, neither is this guy. Wally starts the fight wearing a birdhouse, which is good because nobody wants to see Warbles' marbles. He comes fully armed with bullets and eggs and gets support from smaller birds who have nails strapped to their backs, which is kind of disturbing. Once Wally has taken enough damage, he begins to wildly flap his wings, which causes him to molt all over the screen. Dodging the feathers can be a little bit tricky, but if you keep your movements pretty tight, you can dodge them all without too much trouble. After Wally loses all of his feathers, he slides out of the birdhouse completely naked and we see his Willy. That is, we see his son, Willy Warbles. Willy floats around in a nest surrounded by eggs, and he too is packing firearms. Do enough damage to him, and Willy is out of the picture, and in comes Dad again to try to finish the fight. Despite being beat up, bandaged, on a stretcher, and entirely nude, you have to admire Wally's dedication to winning this fight. What a trooper. The 2 paramedic birds holding his stretcher will try to attack you with pills, while Wally fights you with garbage and even an attack from his own heart. Do enough damage and the bird is dead, which leads to the troubling sight of the paramedics seasoning their dead patient. Is this what human paramedics do when someone flatlines right before their lunch break? We're up to number 7 on this list, and holding that spot is Glumstone the Giant. My experience with this spectacularly animated boss was actually very similar to that of Chef Saltbaker. On regular difficulty and when going for the A grade, I didn't have all that much trouble defeating this boss, though he did score a few more kills than the aforementioned Culinary Master, though like that boss when it came to the fight on Expert, the number of kills went through the roof, 47 in fact, which was the second most on that difficulty setting. In Phase 1, Glumstone has attacks such as firing puffs of potion steam from his mouth, summoning a flock of geese, or, pulling a bear from somewhere. I hope just from the ground. Truth be told, these attacks of his aren't the real hazard, but rather the annoying little gnomes on the ground below you. After this phase, Glumstone rips his beard off and then puts on a fun little puppet show for you. The puppets bounce a ball back and forth while gnomes keep popping out of the ground trying to damage you. It may sound simple on its surface, but this phase is incredibly annoying and was where I'd usually lose this fight. Next, Glumstone swallows you whole and you have to jump from skullish platform to avoid falling into the giant's stomach acid, all while avoiding damage from blow darts and drumsticks and firing away at a sentient ulcer. You'll occasionally need to parry off of the tongue of a skull platform to restore the others, but you shouldn't have to more than a couple of times before enough damage has been done to end the fight. Okay, don't laugh. Sally's stage play is number 6 on this list, and I already know from having seen others that most players probably would have her ranked significantly lower. But what can I say? This Helga Pataki lookalike gave me fits the first time I faced her, ranking in the top 5 in kills on that playthrough, and she managed to get her fair amount on Expert as well. The first phase isn't particularly bad, as Sally leaps up and does a spinning dive kick, while occasionally blowing you parryable kisses or leaving a fan on the ground which acts as a temporary hazard. So long as I kept close to her on the ground or went under her while she was airborne, this part of the fight was pretty simple. Then comes the second phase, and this is the one that proved to be possibly my biggest annoyance in the entire game. Aside from blowing kisses, Sally's attacks from Phase 1 are all still present here, but on top of those, there's an annoying baby at the window dropping a bottle on you from random places. Add to this, Sally's sending wind-up cars after you that will crawl up the screen and then fall to wherever you're standing. All of these elements added together were a massive pain to deal with, and while I've never actually gone and counted which phases from which fights were the hardest for me, I'm guessing this one would have to rank in at least the top 5, and is the key element of my shame for having Sally in my top 10 and ranked higher than bosses that, on Expert, are a much bigger challenge. Phase 3 is where the fight goes back to being simple. While I did die a few times as I was getting used to the elements, having the attacks announced for you in the top left part of the screen is a massive advantage. Be sure to open the meteor that has a parryable star inside, which helps you to jump over the oncoming wave, and also be sure to dodge the lightning bolts. Do enough damage while avoiding these simple attacks, and you'll be on to the even easier finale of the battle. To wrap up this fight, Sally floats from side to side while her parasol spins on the ground, trying to damage you. There's also the occasional falling rose to avoid, but I swear they're so rare that I was never hit once by them. After this short and simple phase, you can walk away victorious, and I imagine with far more of your dignity in place than yours truly. We've reached the top 5, and we're starting off with the Queen Bee herself. No, not that one, the Queen Bee of Inkwell Isle, Rumor Honeybottoms. Sorry, Beyonce, but you aren't as irreplaceable as you thought. I'm not going to lie, I had to look up Beyonce song titles because I don't really listen to her music, and I wanted to see if there was a joke worth telling. And to be honest, I already think it wasn't worth the effort. The fight begins with a visit from the Fuzz. Attacking an officer isn't something I would encourage or advocate, so I like to think of Cuphead's finger gun here as a simple visual representation of him making really good points at Ben Shapiro-like speeds as to why Cuphead collecting soul contracts isn't against the law. Just look at how valid my points are. They're so good that the officer is flying away, ashamed that he wasted my time. Also, is the game trying to make a joke that this bee in a police uniform was performing a sting operation? Once the officer leaves to lick his wounds, Rumor will descend down the left, right, or middle of the screen. If she comes down the middle of the screen, her head will drop like an anchor connected to it at the chin, and she'll fire large bullets on either side that snake their way up the screen. Dropping from the left or right, she'll summon either a pink parryable spear or a purple tetrahedron that fires pink projectiles. I thought about just calling the latter of these large objects a triangle or even purple pyramid for the sake of alliteration, but I'm pretty sure I've never had the chance to say the word tetrahedron before the making of this video, and I didn't want to waste the opportunity. Like and subscribe if tetrahedron is the best word you've heard today. Also, Rumor is more like Beyonce than I originally realized, as she too throws shapes. Though unlike Beyonce, Rumor earned the spot on the list that she occupies, whereas Beyonce's spot atop various musical lists is a little more debatable. She throws shapes, I throw shade. The second phase of the fight was definitely the most difficult. Rumor and her attacks take up a good amount of the fighting space, and dodging them can be quite tricky. After doing enough damage, Rumor decides that the best way to defeat you is to read a book about how to become a plane. I'd call her a nerd, but apparently the book is not only really effective at helping one with this kind of transformation, but it also appears to be short and efficient. As a plane, Rumor's two attacks are firing her fists at you or turning one of her wings into a buzzsaw. I really need to get a hold of that book. The buzzsaw attack is highly telegraphed and easy enough to avoid by just moving to the other side of the screen, or staying put if you're already there. The fists are more unpredictable, so it's best to keep as much space between you and them as possible. Once you've whittled down the bee's health in this phase, the fight is over. Rumor for me was much tougher during our first encounter than she was on the higher difficulty. She certainly wasn't easy by then, but much like other bosses in Cuphead, having familiarity with attack patterns and phases tends to make those fights more predictable. And with Rumor, there isn't a great deal added to the fight on Expert, so your approach is more or less the same. All things considered, though, she's still one of the game's toughest bosses and worthy of her top 5 spot. In at number 4 is Hilda Berg. Despite being the first plane battle in the game, the developers of this title decided that it would be fun to make it one of the hardest despite being something of a tutorial. On top of that, Hilda Berg is the first wall I faced in this game which stalled my progression. Aside from an easy A-grade attempt, Hilda killed me almost 20 times on both my first playthrough on regular, and then again when I tackled her on expert. Hilda's opening phase is rather simple, as the lady expertly quotes Kamala Harris speeches at you, while also being supported by small purple and green zeppelins that have the face and nose of sports analyst Nick Wright. Despite the fact that they are credited with flying the first motorized airplane rather than zeppelins, I still will refer to Hilda's minions as the Wright brothers. During this phase, Hilda will transform back and forth between her normal form and that of a cartoonish representation of one of 3 zodiac symbols, be it a Taurus, Gemini, or Sagittarius. The only one of these 3 that I found consistently troublesome was the Sagittarius. I actually checked a Zodiac website to see if this difficulty could be explained by odd astrological pairings, but aside from it telling me that I'm not compatible with Cancer, it wasn't particularly helpful. After Hilda returns to her normal form, she tosses a tornado at you in hopes that it will damage you, but all it did was make me miss Bill Paxton from Twister. Once you've damaged Hilda enough, she transforms into a moon, just like Sokka's girlfriend from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
That's rough, buddy.
In this final phase, you have to dodge stars and UFO attacks while working to finish the lady off. I have to say that as far as the animation in Cuphead is concerned, Hildeberg's last phase is among the most visually impressive. Add to that the fact that Hilda's boss fight holds up well as far as difficulty is concerned, and you have one of the game's best and hardest bosses. Grim Matchstick takes the number 3 spot in the countdown, and I have to say, this boss provided perhaps the biggest surprise of them all. During my first playthrough, Grim was by far the most difficult boss I faced in the entire game, racking up 43 total kills against me on regular difficulty. Going for the A grade, he managed just 5 kills, but that's actually tied for second most. Then came expert difficulty, and something rather shocking occurred. You see, when you fight Grim on regular, it's a side-scrolling fight, and you start by moving towards him in the first phase. Then in phases 2 and 3, you're moving away from him, which is quite challenging because you constantly have to turn and face him, usually after jumping to a new platform or dodging one of his attacks. On Expert, however, the first phase starts you off moving away from him, then towards him in phases 2 and 3. While this alteration is a tad bit jarring when you first encounter it, it makes the fight so much easier. How much easier? How about just 2 kills on Expert easier? That's all he managed against me. I was so shocked at beating him on my 3rd try that after I finished the rest of the bosses, I went back to fight this one to see if maybe I had just gotten lucky. But no, I beat him again with no hassle whatsoever. I'm not sure if the developers found this change in the fight to be an upgrade in difficulty and maybe I'm just an odd duck, but I'd sure love to know if you other players found this as trivializing as I did. As for the fight itself, it begins with Grim firing meteors in singles or pairs, and mine ripples in threes. What is it with these bosses and their psychedelic mine ripples? I mean, we've got Grim here shooting them from his eyeballs, Jimmy the Great fired them from his forehead, and that VeggieTales reject from the Root Pack fired them from a literal 3rd eyeball. Anyway, after you've made it through this part, Grim unrolls his tongue and a line of little fire guys come marching out. As you move across platforms and try to do damage to Grim, the little guys will acrobatically leap in your direction to do you harm. After you've damaged him enough, Grim gives you the world's greatest trolling face and morphs into a Hydra. Oh, and the trolling continues as it starts raining, and yet the water seems to have no effect on Grim's fire-based attacks. Also, when they shoot fireballs at you, you can actually shoot them, but rather than this eliminating the danger they present, the fireballs break into 4 smaller ones that shoot north, south, east, and west. And as if that wasn't enough, Grim's original head morphs into a flamethrower, and that shoots a line of fire across the screen. This phase is easily one of the game's most infuriating, and for me, that was especially true during my first playthrough. Yet at the same time, I can't deny that Grim Matchstick is still both fun and rewarding. I probably wouldn't call him one of the game's best bosses, but finally getting that knockout screen against him was the moment I knew that I was willing to take on anything and everything this game wanted to throw at me. Okay. I feel like I should tell you that the next boss on this list and the one sitting just above it are practically in a category all their own. No matter the goal or difficulty setting, both were brutal challenges from start to finish. In fact, in each of my 3 playthroughs, these 2 foes were the only ones to rank in the top 5 in total kills each time. Suffice it to say that they did not simply earn their places atop this list, but separated themselves as the cream of the crop. And taking that number 2 spot is the base game's most difficult foe, the most brutal aerial battle Cuphead has to offer, Dr. Call's Robot. Wow, what a fight this guy is. I don't claim to know much about the mental machinations of Dr. Call or even what kind of doctor he is, but apparently he's modeled his career after famed PhDs such as Wily and Robotnik. I'm guessing that after watching The Wizard of Oz one night, Call decided that giving a robot a heart was only step 1. He equipped his automaton menace with a head-mounted laser cannon, drones that fly out from its abdomen, and a bot from his chest which creates a line of laser defense. These 3 functions are difficult enough to deal with, but destroying each one individually actually makes the fight even tougher, as those functions get replaced by even more deadly ones. If you blow open his belly, the drones get replaced by missiles that will slowly chase you until they impact with either you or another missile, unless of course you can shoot them down from a far enough distance to avoid the explosion. Destroying the laser antenna on his head causes the robot's head to transform into a mounted cannon that fires nuts and bolts at you. Shoot open the robot's chest and he'll pull out a magnet that stifles your movements. Once you've destroyed the antenna, chest, and stomach, and in the midst of dealing with those secondary attacks, the robot's heart appears and now it's up to you to destroy that. And that, pumpkin pies, is just phase 1. Thankfully, phase 2 is much easier, but still not easy. Remember those missiles from before? Yeah, they're still around and they keep on coming. Meanwhile, the robot's head has detached from the body and flies across the upper and lower parts of the screen. You have a small window with each pass to do damage, and finding spots to do that while not getting hit by the missiles can be quite tricky. The upside is that you don't have to do a ton of damage to get past this part of the fight. The bad news, and I mean really bad news, is that this leads us to the third and absolutely brutal final phase. Dr. Call takes the controls of his creation, and as he laughs maniacally, the robot unleashes radial bursts from a crystal in his hand, which you must dodge while also avoiding electrical walls in what many consider the most difficult phase in all of Cuphead. Focus, patience, and good dodging skills here are key to making it through this phase alive and ultimately victorious, and the accompanying feeling is one of both relief and triumph. And yet one other boss fight remains, one that surpassed Dr. Call's robot along with all of the rest. A foe so fiendish, so frustrating, so infuriating that he finds himself at the top of this list. And taking that top spot and the title of Cuphead's most difficult baddie is the wicked wintry wizard Mortimer Freeze. Mortimer Freeze was the bane... No, not him, just the word. The bane of my existence on 68 different attempts across 3 separate playthroughs, but none so bad as the last one on Expert, where the 44 deaths he dealt to me were the most of any boss in the game. As the battle commences, Freeze will typically start by summoning living icicles from underneath his cloak, which is more than a tad creepy. As you work to either evade or take out these little guys, Morty floats over you and either fires tarot cards or stops to show off his incredible upper body strength by trying to slam a whale onto your head. While this phase isn't likely to result in many deaths for the player, it can easily wear you down by a hit point or two before you're on to the 2 most difficult phases. Phase 2 has Freeze putting on a suit of snowy armor. He'll roll and leap back and forth, turning into a refrigerator and firing ice cubes that break into smaller ice cubes, and send out a squadron of flying popsicles after you. And when he's not doing those things, he's slamming his fists to summon up spikes from the ground beneath you. This might be the most infuriating phase of the entire game for me. Nothing on its own seems especially hard, but the combination of these elements and the unpredictable nature of how and when they occur just seems to chip away at that HP to the point where you're either drained to death completely or down to your last leg before you're on to the home stretch. Once you've blasted your way into Mortimer's final phase, he transforms into the universal symbol for being perpetually offended. Here, you'll be leaping to and from one of 5 platforms that are moving either clockwise or Australian clockwise formation. As the platforms move, Freeze either throws buckets filled with small moons at you, summon ice cream cones that converge on your location, or squeeze out his eyeball, which fires a line of electricity as it moves to the far side of the screen and back again. Wow, that last one seems a bit extreme. So, if you've held on to your health through all of this and whittled down his HP to 0, then like me, you will have conquered he whom I consider the game's most difficult boss of all. Well guys, that does it for my Cuphead boss ranking. I'd like to thank everyone so much for checking this out and visiting my channel, and if you enjoyed it, please smash that thumb. No, the good thumb please. Hopefully this is just the beginning of a long and fruitful journey, and you're more than welcome to join me by hitting the subscribe button and offering any thoughts and comments you might have. Until the next time, God bless you, and goodbye.